Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to be going through the Bible on an interesting series of studies. So, um, as you know, on this channel, we talk a lot about animals, but I've been really wanting to talk about animals in relation to creation in the Bible and stuff. But we're going to go through an animals in the Bible series. But I want to expand beyond just talking about creation. We will do that maybe in a separate series, but really what I want to use this series to explore is how animals reflect the nature and character of God, and how God communicates to us through the revealing of His creation, and sometimes even telling us what He wants from us through His creation. And in this series, especially through animals, we might touch on some other aspects, maybe in the future. But for now, we're just going to go through animals in the Bible and how God communicates to us through His creation. And one of the key passages that a lot of people go through is Job. Job, about 38 through 42. Um, so we of course have the, if you know anything about the story of Job, we have Job's trials, we have all the things he's gone through, his friends giving him bad advice, terrible advice. And then we have God coming to Job, and Job's kind of has a lot of complaints against God, and it's kind of interesting, this passage, and we can explore all sorts of things about this passage that are very complicated. But the general gist is, God has heard all of Job's complaints, and He comes to Job, and He basically gives him a rundown of like how little Job actually knows about the world and God's ways in the world. And so he begins by asking him a series of questions. These sort of begin off more broad, kind of um, opens perspective, the heavenly perspective, and kind of the general ways the world works through snow, water, rain, all that sort of stuff. And but around chapter 39, he starts getting into his creation, and specifically, more or less, mostly animals. And he talks about hawks, lions, mountain goats, ostrich. The ostrich passage is fascinating, and I would like to get into sometime because it's a very one of the oddest parts of, at least within this section of Job. Job is a very odd book as a whole, but that to me has always stood out as being a very odd thing. But one of the animals he focuses on this passage is the horse. And this is one of my favorite passages from the book of Job. There are a couple of really great ones, but this is probably my top five little passages from the book of Job. And I'll get to why as soon as we're done reading it. But so we're going to be reading from Job 39, verses 19 through 25, and then we'll discuss them a bit. So, starting verse 19. Do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like a locust? His majestic snorting is frightening. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He goes to meet the battle. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. And he does not turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, the flashing spear and javelin. He races over the ground with a roar and a fury, and he does not stand still when he hears the sound of the trumpet. As often as the trumpet sounds, he says, "Ah," and senses the battle from afar, and thunder of captains and the war cry. So, very powerful piece. If you are a Disney film fanatic, you will know that this passage was used for the beginning of their movie on Secretariat, which is one of my favorite Disney films in the last 25 years. Um, Probably in my top 10 favorite Disney films of the last 25 years. I really liked this film, and it really got me interested in Secretariat. But what I want to focus on in this passage is kind of the interesting nature of what he focuses on regarding the horse. What are the things God is focusing on? Well, he's focusing on its strength, its ability to leap, um, and most importantly, the biggest focus of the passage is his ability to enter into battle unafraid. Right? We um, we look at horses as has been one of the primary emblems of war for the last 4,000 years, right? Horses have played a key role in almost most of the major battles through most of history. Not always, but at a lot of battles, especially the first 2,000 years and even up until nearly the present day. Think about horses were pretty much part of war up until about World War II, at least on a cavalry end. Horses then were still used as means of transportation and uh, supply lines, even in World War II and the Korean War. So it wasn't unusual up until very recently to see horses play a major part in war. Um, it's pretty much been the predominant means um, of transportation and charging into war was on a horse. Um, and so, what's fascinating about this passage is that, um, first of all, we see kind of because Job is often considered one of the earliest books, if not maybe written, at least the story is one of the first. It all kind of depends on how you ask it, whether it was actually written first, whether it's in a later account written about past events. How that all breaks down is hard, but basically, it's almost saying. First of all, it's one of the things it's pointing out is war has been a part of human history for a very long time. But the main thing he's getting across is that the nature of the horse is one that does not fear it. And what's so fascinating about this is that we, um, especially if you're a Christian, have kind of been very averse to war, especially lately, with a lot of things that are going on, and there have been some terrible things going on in the world. Um, and there's um, wars abroad, and then there's kind of a civil war of cultural things and all sorts of stuff. Um, and one of the things that I'm going to be very blunt and honest about is that we, especially as Christians, should not be afraid to enter into war. Um, War is not something to be frightened of. It doesn't mean we act, of course, in the same way that uh, nations and great kingdoms have for centuries. It doesn't mean we participate in those things on the same level or in the same way, but that we at least enter into those conflicts without fear and trembling. We speak truth, we speak light, we speak love, but there are not things to be afraid of. We know, um, and I was just reading earlier this week that famous verse. rest in peace is one of the last words Jesus said. And he said, I've overcome the world, right? He's already overcome. His kingdom is greater than this world, and it has triumphed through the centuries, through the spreading of the gospel, right? And so, no matter what's going on, and I'm not going to make any, at least on this one, any direct political statement, but basically, the main thing, first of all, we should be concerned about is people's souls and lives, and that the gospel is something not to be afraid of. We have a greater power than the horse. We have Jesus Christ and the sending of the Holy Spirit. And Christians throughout the ages have endured a whole lot worse than most of the things going on, at least in America. And there are a lot of Christians today facing worse things overseas. But we, as a westernized culture, have become very afraid of things unnecessarily. And the horse tells us, and I think in God's message, is to enter into the battle without fear, without trembling, to know that captains of this world will not prevail in light of the gospel. I think of then how this relates especially to Hebrews 11, which is the Hall of Faith passage, and it talks about the faith of the saints, of the patriarchs, and it talks about how they endured all the hardship of persecution, of rebellion, of the things going on in the world that they couldn't really control. And that's kind of the other thing is that we are to do is it's not so much like we go in with the desire to fix everything or that everything's going to be all right, and we may we may be crushed under the weight of war, right? But a horse doesn't think about those things, right? A horse doesn't enter into the war thinking, "Oh, how do I win?" Right? It's still an animal. It's acting on instinct. It's acting on this desire to enter a war into fray without any sense of the danger that's ahead of it. And that may mean at times that the horse is crushed underneath the weight of a battle. And so one of the other things to take away is that we don't live in fear. And for any of you who are not Christians, maybe you've stopped listening by now, and you're my followers. I would just encourage you with the fact that we're not entering into a war that's again of this world. We're entering into a war of spiritual things, and what we seek is the salvation of the world being made right through the spreading of God's word and the message that Jesus Christ overcame the world, overcame sin and death, and we can live forever in eternity with him. So the battle isn't won here on earth. The battle is already run for us. We are just desiring to follow Christ and to love others in a way that brings honor and glory to him. And so, with Hebrews 11, I do want to end on those words because I think it's a source of encouragement to recognize the battle we're in is not a battle which requires sword or spear or lance. Requires something greater, the power of the Holy Spirit working inside us to love others, and to do what he has called us to do in a broken world, and to lift up the brokenhearted in the light of Christ. And so, so I'm going to read this, and I hope it's an encouragement to you. So this is the end of Hebrews, chapter 11, and this may not sound encouraging until I get the last verses. So starting chapter 11, starting in verse starting verse 32. And what shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David, and Samuel, and the prophets who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, and shut the mouths of lions, quenching the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. From weakness were made strong, and became mighty in war, putting foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead from the resurrection, and others were tortured, not accepting their release, so they might obtain a better resurrection. And others experienced mocking and flogging and further chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were put to death by the sword, they went about in sheepskin and goatskin, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, people of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in the deserts, on mountains, and sheltering in caves and holes in the ground. All these, having gained the approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised, because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. So, the point of that is to recognize that there are many through their deeds, men of faith who succeeded, who fought in difficult times and won. And yet many, if not most, did not. They suffered all the torments of this world, all the horrible things that they went through, and it led to them even hiding in caves. But what they didn't give up was their faith. They did not give that up. And they knew it was because they were waiting something greater. We are waiting something greater, the resurrection and restoration. And so that's an important thing that I hope will be a reminder for you today. Have a blessed day.